Hello and welcome to the Education Magazine. My name is Mike Charles and I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Sinclairslaw, and also I'm a solicitor, and I've been practicing in education law since 1994. Don't look at me like that, Chris. I know you're trying to make out I'm old, but yes, I've been practicing since 1994, and I know I don't look it, but I have. I've enjoyed it immensely, and I'm delighted to be able to communicate to you topics and issues that are going to concern you, and matters that I've read about on Facebook, and people have been communicating with me about all different issues, and we're going to be touching upon all those issues, Chris, in education, from higher education to special educational needs, bullying, things like that at school. So Chris, over to you. What have you been?
Yes, so I'm Christopher McFarland. I'm one of the associate solicitors here at Sinclairslaw. I'm also the older brother of a young lady with special educational needs. So it's nice to be here and nice to work here and deal with these topics on a daily basis. Obviously, Mike, normally we would go around the country doing seminars in person. 2020 put paid to that. But we came up with this idea as a way to kind of talk about topics that were relevant to our clients and to potential clients and to others dealing with issues in education, and to give perhaps a less formal conversation about the topics as well. And I know Charlotte was a big advocate of that. So Charlotte, what are you hoping to achieve through this new show of ours?
Well, I just thought I listen to a lot of podcasts. And what I really like about podcasts is that a lot of the time you've got people who know their field really well, and they're not delivering a webinar or a seminar. There's lots of value in that, obviously, she added hastily, because I do lots of them. But, I just thought, where's the chat? Where is that in education law? Where is that experience of just a few people who know their area well and are interested in it, just talking informally about topics that have come up in the news and topics that might be of interest to people who have children at school, who have children with special educational needs, or who are just interested generally. So broadly, that's what I'd like to see. And I think we're going to do that, given where we are at the moment.
And Charlotte, you're a leading barrister. I know you always want to...
I'm a barrister. I'm a barrister who sometimes leads.
You've won some cases that are unwinnable, let's be fair.
I have won some cases. I have, and I feel like I should disclose this, I have also lost some cases.
Well, that
has happened.
I've got to say, I think we all agree with this, but I cannot stand when people try and make out that they never lose a case.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly,
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, actually, Mike, because, I always find it really disingenuous when you see that kind of advert, oh, well, you've never lost a case. Well, you've never either tried a hard case or you've never done a case, and obviously, and I'm sure Charlotte's saying we are very blessed and touch wood. We have a good record, an outstanding record, actually, in these areas. But, you can't win them all. And I think that's another thing that's good to discuss as part of this type of forum is the reality of the challenges. Because, when parents come to us, they come to us for advice, we give them that advice, and we have a great time in this case, great success rate. But of course, it's important to recognize that sometimes for some parents, that's not the end of the story. Sometimes you can win and maybe what you thought was right doesn't work out. Maybe sometimes you aren't successful at tribunal. Actually, what happens next actually works even better for the child than you ever thought. So it's good to kind of talk about all of these different things. And I think, again, that's what this show can do, is discuss sometimes the less talked about topics.
Well, really what's being said is that sometimes the tribunal is right and the parents are not right, and neither is the local authority.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the thing that we always have to say at the outset is, however much advice we give, I suppose this is turning into a disclaimer, and it wouldn't really be a lawyer's sort of chat without a disclaimer. So I'll do the disclaimer. I will be the bad guy here. So I guess what we're really saying is, firstly, we can't really give legal advice that is tailored to individuals on a sort of broadcast like this. So we're always talking generally or hypothetically, and everybody has to bear in mind that legal advice comes when you go to a lawyer, you start a relationship, a professional relationship with a lawyer, and that lawyer gives you advice tailored to your particular situation. So hopefully what we say will give people a steer in terms of where to go or where to start. But what we can't do is give individual advice. And the second thing is, however much we advise, however experienced we are, however reasonable our advice is, if you're talking about ending up in the tribunal, or perhaps you're going to the administrative court on a judicial review, maybe you're going to the county court on a disability discrimination claim, wherever you're going, ultimately, the responsibility for the decision making lies with the tribunal. You don't know your tribunal. You don't know what they're going to make of the papers. You can have a stab at it, and a lot of the time we'll be right, but we won't necessarily be right. Evidence can go in a different way than you thought. So there's a lot of, we talk about litigation risk as lawyers, and all we really mean is this decision ultimately is going to be made by different people who we have no control over, who will see you for a very short period of time and have to make a lot of very important decisions about you and your child, or you or your child in that very short period. They may not fully understand the problem. They may not get it right. And as Mike said, sometimes the tribunal will get it right and everybody else would have been wrong. So disclaimer over. As we said, so I said it.
But as Charlotte, I'm sure you'd agree, the magazine is not simply just about the law even.
No, it's about the wider the wider issues, because we know that, I mean, we have recurring clients, don't we? We have clients who come to us for one thing when their child is maybe 5 or 6. We might see those clients again at 11 or 12, and again at 18 or 16, and maybe again at 19 plus.
But it's not also about just simply special educational needs. Anything that relates to education at schools. And we would want to hear from schools. We want to hear about the good things, celebrate the wonderful achievements that many schools actually to achieve. And we're talking there will be some topics that we will be discussing, Chris, won't there? There'll be some more hard-hitting topics. We have to do that because everything that relates to children and young people, we want to touch upon. We want to discuss bullying at schools. We want to talk good schools, schools that deal with special educational needs, special schools, and the like. Chris, what any thoughts you want the magazine to cover?
I think really, Mike, you've hit the nail on the head. You know, you can talk about the great things, you know, growing up, as I say, with my sister having disability, still has disability, they are lifelong, but, you know, it was a great joy to have her in my life, it still is, you know, and very much, you know, because of it's special educational needs, it's a learning difficulty, you know, it's almost a part of her as well, that innocence that comes with that. So there's a lot of good. But as you say, there's also harder topics, you know, there's struggles. And I think that what I would really like to see us do is cover both sides, you know, the joys of having a child with special educational needs. And I think there are joys, and I think it's important to bear that in mind. But also then to kind of talk about the struggles in a genuine way, to get people on who are having this as a lived experience, you know, and not just, you know, I mean, as Charlotte rightfully said, we do our seminars, you know, we do our other talks that are more formal. They're there to give people advice and guidance and talk about next steps. And we will do that as part of this. But it's also nice just sometimes to hear stories of people who've come through difficulty, maybe going through difficult times right now, but also then those who are having a good experience, you say, schools that are really seeing great success. And I think that's a great way to show both sides of the lived experience. And
even stories, Charlotte, I'm sure you'll agree, stories about people who've achieved things, wonderful things, who may not have been expected to achieve those wonderful things.
Yeah.
Charlotte, what would you like the magazine to cover?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I suppose because I'm kind of an advocate and I sort of get involved when people want to go to court, inevitably what I want to focus on is going to be more around things like things that are more directly court-based, things that have a court-based remedy. So, for example, as we know, some parents end up in a situation where their children just cannot cope with school. So one of the things that I'd like to talk about is what you can do if your child is in a situation where they're capable of learning, but they're not capable of going to school. They're not capable of going to their local school. Perhaps there isn't an appropriate school around for them. What parents can do about that. I'm quite interested in talking about things like special educational needs in higher education, because we know that there are lots of students who go on to university or further education colleges and they're doing mainstream courses, they're taking national qualifications, but they need a little bit of help. So talking about what the kind of regime is around that and what the potential remedies are. And I'm also interested, in sort of the teaching experience, because as you know, I also do some employment work. And you can have situations where schools have issues that touch both on the education of pupils and on their duties as employers to teachers. So I'm quite interested in that crossover if it comes up in the course of this programme. But other than that, I suspect that our interests overlap to a significant extent. And I'm really looking forward to learning more about the wider education picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you touched upon it, the experience of the university student, not necessarily just the student who's got special educational needs. student. I mean, the number of cases, Chris, that come in from the university student is breathtaking.
Absolutely right, Mike. And, you know, you and I deal with a broad range of university cases. It could be discrimination, as Charlotte says, you know, maybe arising from a disability, sometimes other protected characteristics. You know, we deal with disciplinary, fitness to practice, you know, academic appeals. There is a real broad spectrum of educational law topics at the university level. And I think for me, you know, one of the things I would like to see is to see students become more aware of their rights. You know, I think, you know, thinking back to when I was a student, especially a fresher, you know, you get to university and they enroll, and of course they used to hand you a printed out manual. Now they just give you a link. And of course, you know, they expect you to read it. The university expects you to read it. But of course, you know, really, certainly in my day, you just kind of put it in your bag and you went down the pub with your new friends, you know, and it's quite good, I think, for us to, again, just relay that information to potential students. Maybe they're facing difficulties, maybe they're just interested in the topic, you know, and also to parents as well, because, you know, you do find that, you know, these children, young people, they're turning to their parents first. Maybe their parents don't understand what's going on. And it's good just to discuss those topics, because the relationship between universities and students has changed significantly. You know, students are paying either directly or through loans for their courses now. So of course it is a contractual and a consumer relationship. But of course you may find that the way universities are approaching their students perhaps hasn't changed as much as it was when it was grant led. And in some ways I find that some universities, not all of course, some are much better, but some universities almost make it sound like it's a real privilege to study at this university. And it doesn't matter if you're paying us £11,000 a year, or if you're an international student, you know, we're £50,000 a year. Right. You know, if something goes wrong, or if we do something wrong, maybe we're going to say that's your fault. So it would be good to kind of explore those topics as well. Of course, I'd be remiss to say we wouldn't be talking about coronavirus, because of course the effect it's had has been immeasurable. A topic we probably all want to forget, but if we're going to do this properly, we're going to have to talk about it at least once.
We're going to have to talk about the lockdown, and we want to hear from you too about the kind of experiences you've had during lockdown. I mean, and particularly, I think the special educational needs world, really, the world of people with disabilities, and how they've been coping with lockdown and the restrictions to their ability to do normal things, Chris, like going out and shop, which is what we take for granted, but doing things that they need to do to learn and to have that experience. And we can talk about the petitions that we've been issuing to try and help and to promote the rights of those with disabilities. So yes, we want to talk about that too. And Charlotte, we will be talking about some hard-hitting stuff too, won't we? We'll be talking about highly sort of stressful even. We will.
I mean, we're going to be talking about the large number of children and young people who we see who have mental health difficulties. We're going to hear some stories, I think, of how those difficulties have been overcome, and some very sad stories where it has not been possible to overcome those difficulties. And we're going to be trying to talk about that with a view to a general sort of steer in terms of what people can do when they're in that situation, and the sort of various stages at which you might be able to catch it and try to turn it around. I mean, the other thing actually that I will probably give to these broadcasts, and I think I probably better declare it now. As you know, because I'm a barrister, I'm in independent practice, which means that I'm self-employed and I act for a wide range of different people. So I do a lot of work for parents and young people. I also do work for local authorities. I do work for schools. I do work for CCGs. I do work for universities. And I think it is important, because it only reflects the advice that we always have to give, to just bear in mind that whilst there are some very important statutory and regulatory duties that protect the rights of students, of parents, of young people, of children, there are limits to those rights. And it's always important to have an understanding of how much it is reasonable to ask for, because otherwise it is, in some cases, I think, difficult to necessarily tell the difference between what is needed and what would be really nice to have. So one of the things that we'll be talking about, I think, is the difference between provision that's needed and over provision, and the reasonable limits of things like the duty to make reasonable adjustments.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely.
And we want to invite guests on, different guests from different fields. We'd like to hear from teachers, Senko, parents, psychiatrists, doctors, psychologists. We want everyone involved in this magazine. It's your broadcast too. It's an opportunity for you to tell us what you want to talk about and you want us to talk about. And I think also, Chris, it's going to be, we mustn't forget, just basic education news, what's going on in the world of education.
Yeah, and cases as well. It's something that we do as lawyers, read through case law. And of course, a lot of time that is incredibly dry. But of course, we can try and, alert people to maybe some of the larger cases that come out, some of the more important cases that come out. So again, you can keep people abreast of new developments and up to date on the issues at hand. So yeah, we'll have a broad spectrum of things to talk about.
And I mentioned, Charlotte, on Facebook, I said that one of the things that I wanted this magazine to do would be to touch upon some things that is difficult to get the media to talk about. And because they want a certain story and they dismiss so many other stories which are really important to discuss. And we want to talk about all sorts of issues, not just merely the things that actually catch the media attention. So the day-to-day troubles that parents and children and students have in the education system. And that goes from the basic law to the basic news, what the government's doing about education, changes in Wales, of course.
Absolutely.
The big changes on special educational needs that we're waiting for years.
That's right, yeah, September 2021 now.
You tell me, Charlotte, I don't understand this. You tell me, why is it that in English law, we've had the ability to appeal an annual review for years and years, and we still don't have that in Wales yet?
I have no answer for you, Mike, because it's one of those things that it's difficult to objectively understand.
and also, it just beggars belief that this additional learningese law in Wales is still on the shelf at the moment. It's still not coming into force, and we still are left in a very unacceptable situation where young people are going to the very body that is entrusted to provide and pay for the support to make the critical decisions without an opportunity to appeal to an independent forum like a tribunal. And we've had the system in England where you have the Children and Families Act 2014 giving you the tribunal, giving you a tribunal that can exercise jurisdiction right the way up to 25. Not having that in Wales. I mean, I think it's really unacceptable that Wales has had to wait so long. And we will be talking about those kind of issues. We'll be talking about cross-border points that are happening in England and things that are happening in comparison to Wales, and some of the good things that Wales are introducing,
right.
but yet not yet introduced. we want to talk about that. And the difference in, what about restrictions? The restrictions that the coronavirus legislation is introduced. I mean, is that going to be an issue for us lawyers? Or are we just simply remaining silent because we genuinely believe that this is a pandemic that we must tackle, all of us, responsibly, rather than try and make legal challenges over the way the government...
Well, that's why people need to tune in, Mike, to make sure they find out the answers to this question.
So all of these kind of topics. And I want to also deal with bullying, because school bullying has been something that I've been passionate to talk about for many, many years. And I want to bring some guests on who made some great things with their lives after going through that terrible ordeal, and people who have really achieved big things. We want to talk to sports people, sports personalities who achieved some great things, even though they've been bullied. You would never think they've been bullied, Chris. No. Looking at them today.
Well, I think that's a good thing as well, by bringing on people who, say, athletic sports people or other people who've achieved great things. Looking at them now, you might think, oh, they were never bullied, they were always popular, they might be attractive, you never know. You'd think they could never be bullied. What reason could you bully them? But actually, I think it's good to explain that it does affect everyone, or at least one time in their life, and it can affect anyone as well, whether you've been bullied or historically or now. And I think it's an important topic to discuss and to shine a light on. So absolutely, another great topic to cover.
So this broadcast is the introductory broadcast. We're talking about what we are going to talk about. We are so looking forward to the first real episode, which is going to touch upon, I think it's going to be quite a difficult subject. Charlotte, have you got any thoughts about what we're going to be talking about in the upcoming episodes?
Well, I think that we're really going to go into every parent's worst fear, aren't we?
Yeah.
That's where we're going. So we're going to be talking about, well, I suppose we're going to be hearing the story of somebody who lost their son in very difficult and distressing circumstances. And we're going to be talking about using that, I suppose, as a springboard to talk about the ways in which you can seek help if you're concerned that your child, or whether they're a child or whether they're a young adult, might be reaching a point of mental health crisis. It is a really difficult and sad topic, but it's also a really important topic.
It's the responsibility, I think, of the Education magazine, this new broadcast, to touch upon these topics, to give an idea to people who may be going through a terrible crisis that there is hope and there is something that can be done. And so from those kind of topics, we will be going on to talk about, as I say, bullying and celebration. You know, we're going to have a good Christmas episode, I think, Chris. We're going to have to invite lots of people on to talk about good things that are happening, even though it's awful at the moment. Everyone's feeling so stale because of the
well, you know, you've got
lockdown.
to come together in difficult times, haven't you? And as you say, you know, we are going to touch upon difficult topics, sensitive topics. As Charlotte said, the first episode is going to be a bit of a tough one, but also hopefully a hopeful one at the end for those who may be able to seek help and support. And of course, then, yes, you know, come the end of the year, I think a year in review for 2020 is going to be an interesting topic to discuss. It's been a year like no other, but hopefully we can get some good guests on as well to speak about that and look ahead to 2021.
What's 2021 going to bring us, Charlotte? What do you think? What do you think's on the horizon?
Well, I don't know how much appetite anybody has for predicting that kind of thing anymore. I would hope that by 2021 we'll have a better idea of what we're dealing with in terms of coronavirus. And whilst there are some aspects of lockdown that I enjoy very much because I have a job that means that I can work from home, I would hope that things have become a bit easier for people who aren't in that position, and for people who perhaps are living on their own or living away from those members of their family who they want to be with, and maybe have a bit more freedom to get out, to give people a cuddle, to go, you know, to go and see a film, all the things that we took for granted until March of this year. And so that's my hope, but it's not a prediction because I think we're all way past predictions.
Well, I had, funny enough, Chris, I had the BBC on the line today asking me to comment on the restrictions and the separation of young people from their families, and particularly those in supported living arrangements, and the interpretation that's placed upon the law by different local authorities. They're interpreting the law very differently, and some people have not seen their kids or young or their siblings in a long time because they are in supported living arrangements or in residential care. So that's the kind of thing that no doubt we can talk about in future episodes, but also now it's happening right now. And that's what this broadcast is about. It's not just simply about what has happened, it's about what's happening and what is likely to happen in the future. Charlotte, sorry, did I interrupt you?
You did not. I was nodding and saying,
Brilliant. Chris, well, I mean, that really is the Education magazine. That's what we're going to be talking about, and that's what we want to hear from you about. So please do continue to follow me on Facebook, and please do keep telling me your stories, because those stories are going to help shape this magazine. It's going to help. We might invite you on, and we might invite you to come and join us and talk about your story. Of course, only if you want to. We're not going to force anyone to do it, but if you want to talk about your story, and you want to have our perspectives, not necessarily specific advice, but perspectives on what we've heard, but we'd be very delighted to hear from you, and please join us. But really, I'm looking forward to the first episode.
Me too.
I think that's going to be broadcast very soon. So please watch this space, because we're going to be in your homes in not too distant future, very soon. So thank you all for joining us. Chris, have you got any parting words to say?
Just thank you all for joining us. And yes, as Mike said, let us know what topics you'd like to see, and we'll keep those in mind for future episodes.
Charlotte, thank you for joining us on this first introductory episode. And have you got anything to say?
No, just thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it progresses.
Excellent. Well, then that's it. All it leaves me to say is to thank you for watching this introductory session. So we'll look forward to joining you again at the Education magazine. So stay safe.